I know almost nothing about mushrooms, but I think they're pretty freaking sick organisms. And I haven't really used my degree in ecology since I graduated from university last year. So I thought that I would take upon this project, which I call the Mushroom Challenge. So for the next 100 days, I'm going to go out and learn to identify 100 different species of mushrooms that grow around me in British Columbia.
All right, babe, time to go on your field trip.
Bye, babe. Love you. Before we go out and identify mushrooms, it's helpful to first understand what a mushroom truly is. A mushroom is the above-ground representation of a unique being that predominantly exists below ground and kind of straddles the line between a plant and an animal. Mushrooms are the fruiting body or reproductive structure of fungi. The actual living body of the organism is found underground in the form of microscopic rooting threads called mycelium. So the main purpose of a mushroom is to produce spores that get disseminated throughout the forest floor and create new networks of mycelium. So if you really think about it, mushrooms are basically the genitals of fungi. There's a lot of information that you have to collect and interpret from each specimen you find in order to be able to get an accurate identification on what species you're looking at. You have to look at its dimensions. How tall is the stem? How wide is the cap? Then take a better look at its cap. What color is it? What shape is it? Is it conical, flat, concave? Is it a cup, a crust, a jelly? Then take a look under the cap. Are there gills, veins, pores, or teeth? What color are they? How are they attached? Is it covered by a veil? Next, look down at the stalk. Is there a ring? Is it dense and fibrous or hollow? Does it bruise or bleed when broken? As you can see, identifying a mushroom is a really technical task. This has actually turned out to be the best time to find mushrooms. I thought at this point there would already be snow on the ground coming into mid to late November, but it's been super rainy still. In fact, on the West Coast, they've gotten hit pretty bad. Like, entire roads and cities are being absolutely flooded and washed away. It's a really serious situation. But over where I am on the southeastern interior of the province, it's just been super rainy. I mean, this is the first time I've seen the sun in like 2 weeks, but the silver lining in this situation is that the mushrooms are still out and they're freaking thriving. So it is day 3 of the Mushroom Challenge, and my boyfriend and I have driven an hour north of Nelson to the town of Caslow because I met this girl on the local mushroom foraging group, and she was willing to show me around and help me find some mushrooms. The mushroom in specific that we're looking for here is the prized pine mushroom. So this is a particular site we just found. Apparently squirrels like picking mushrooms and then putting them on trees to dry. Apparently this is a common thing. As squirrels prepare for winter, they tend to pick mushrooms and then put them up in trees to dry until they turn into a sort of jerky that they like to snack on over the winter. Now this is one massive polypore. Oh, look at that. Apparently it's a red belted polypore. Really beautiful. Take a look at those spores. They're so minute, you can barely see them with the naked eye. So I was told apparently this is a cat's tongue. Yeah, I really like going out with someone who knows their mushrooms because you're making my life a lot easier. Ooh, but look at the underside. Oh, is this why it's called the cat's tongue? Because
yeah, the texture.
Yeah, the texture of the hymenophore. I guess those are tiny little teeth. They kind of look like the texture of a cat's tongue. And the stipe, the stem itself is really cool. It's like this almost translucent white jelly texture. But this specimen's a bit old because it's more brownish.
Yeah, so that's one of the few that you can just eat right off the forest floor.
So we just found some more cat's tongue. I'm getting a little hungry, so might as well take a little snack. It literally tastes like almost like eating a bland booger, to be honest. So this mushroom right here is why we came to Caslow. This is a $15 mushroom. It's called a pine mushroom, but it's also called a matsutake mushroom. And they're really big in Asia. It kind of looks like just a regular white button mushroom, but usually they get a lot bigger, and they're prized for their very spicy and aromatic flavor. So mushroom picking is like a pretty big thing here in British Columbia, and people can get big bucks for stuff like that. Usually matsutakes, they're found hidden within the soil with like a little bit of a mossy cap underneath or on top of it. So the way that you want to go about it is you really want to dig through and pop it up. Now, as you can see, there's a veil on this one, which will break off when it gets older, but specimens like this with the veil still on are considered grade A mushrooms, so they're the most prized by mushroom buyers, and that's why you can get big bucks for stuff like that. Exciting. Would you say we can still eat this?
Oh, definitely.
Oh my god. So this is another pine mushroom. It's much older, and as you can see, it's flagged out. It's fully unveiled itself. Now these ones are a little less valuable on the market, but because they weigh more, if you can pick a bunch of them, they're also profitable. So you want to go all the way down and like...
I would flip your hand over.
Yeah.
And just try to pop it up, find the bottom, and just pop it up without... you can also pinch the stipe at the very bottom, if that helps. And wiggling helps break those little roots. There you go. And then cover your hole back up.
Cover the hole back up. Yep. And so why do you cover the hole back up?
So the mycelium doesn't dry out and the moss doesn't get damaged.
Okay, yeah, because so basically with mushrooms, you can pick the fruit. It's like picking an apple off the tree. Yep. But you want to cover the mycelium because that, if you leave that exposed, that will damage the mushroom. Yeah. Look at that. You can definitely smell. It almost smells like pine sap. Yeah. It's really nice.
Some people say dirty socks, others say cinnamon.
Wow. There's a little worm on that one.
It's not too old because it's still nice and pale on the underside. It hasn't browned too much. Do you want a sponge?
Nice. So this is still edible.
Oh yeah. Is the stipe really firm?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's good to go. It doesn't seem like there's worms in that one.
Is this hollow?
No, it's solid. Solid all the way through.
And you said matsutakes, they have this like grayish...
Yep, the
thing on the base.
The ashy looking layer, and we could cut the bottom off if you want to see if there's worms inside. Because we're not selling them, you don't need to keep that the stipe intact. So we could cut it open if you wanted to see.
Yeah. Why would you want to keep that stipe intact?
They just last longer, and when they buy them in Japan, they want the whole mushroom.
Fair enough. We just came upon this cute little patch of mushrooms. I was admiring the underside of it, and the girl that we're with, Sydney, thinks that they're a type of chanterelle. I quickly looked at the book. I think they're flame-colored chanterelles. If so, I'm going to start picking them. The hardest part about this challenge for me at the beginning has been just dealing with identifying a large volume of specimens all at the same time. I kind of started this project at not the best time of year, basically late October, early November, which is at the tail end of prime mushroom season. It would have been better to start this like in September or October, but I couldn't do that at that point in my life. Yet I was still interested in doing this project. My strategy going into this project has been just trying to identify as many mushrooms as possible before winter hits and the snow kind of derails my plans. I still think I can try to find some mushrooms at that time, but obviously this is my last opportunity to see a lot of them on the forest floor. The way that I was going about things was I was writing down characteristics of all these specimens and collecting them in little plastic bags and telling myself that once I get home, I'll just sit down and identify them all. And that never really worked out because I would spend a couple of hours in the field, and by the time I got back home, I obviously didn't want to continue doing this. This is not a job for me. This is like a borderline hobby, so I have other shit to do in my day. And so I'd leave those mushrooms in their bags, thinking I'll get to it the next day or so, and by that point they're already starting to turn to mush. I've probably collected close to 50 specimens at this point, yet most of them have kind of gone to waste because I haven't been able to really dedicate myself to identifying them. So my new strategy is I am trying to identify as many of them as I can while I'm out in the field. Maybe that means I see less mushrooms or take longer to do my whole sampling and survey, but I try to do it what I can in the field, and if there's really a mushroom that stumps me and that I think it's worth looking at, then I will write the characteristics down in my booklet and grab a sample and bring it home. I've also started to replace plastic bags to paper bags. You know, I want to try to be an ethical scientist, so I stole a bunch of brown paper bags from the mushroom aisle at my local grocery store. However, I don't think that brown bags make the best places to store mushrooms either. They're slimy little creatures, and by the time I get home, the bag is basically disintegrating. Long story short, I'm still figuring out how to properly process all of these specimens. Hi! So lobster mushrooms are pretty cool because they're actually not really grown naturally like this. And what I mean by that is there's no really such thing as a lobster mushroom. A lobster mushroom basically is a Frankenstein mushroom. It's usually a Rasula or a Lactaria species that has been parasitized by another mushroom, which gives it this red speckled look and this weird shape. Usually it would be that, like, you know, regular mushroom cap shape that you would see. And it turns it into this weird deformed beast. And it's interesting because this mushroom is a very popular edible and it definitely has that kind of fishy taste. I found this like little guy right beside the lobster mushrooms, and I'm thinking that this is the parasitized mushroom in action. As you can see, it's just a regular old button mushroom, but the very top of it is starting to get the same kind of red speckling on it, which is probably that parasitic mushroom in action. So right here behind me, I have a patch of little brown mushrooms that I have dared myself to try to identify. And I'm gonna demonstrate to you how hard it is to do this. Right, so I've narrowed it down to believing that these little guys are a type of Mycena. That seems to be one of the most common names for little brown mushrooms. They're in the Trichiloma family. Now, I thought it would be easy to figure this out because, you know, even though it's a little brown mushroom, the underside has these really pretty pinkish gills. So I've narrowed it down to perhaps 2 different species. My first guess is that it is the orange Mycena, also known as Mycena leiana. Mycena leiana. And so the reason why I think it is that is because, you know, the shape of the cap is exactly like what it is described. It is because it's first bell shaped, but it becomes convex with a sunken center, which is correct. The gills are attached close to crowded, and they are this ochre pinkish color. All right. Makes sense so far. Now, what throws me off about that description is that the habitat says they are usually clustered on deciduous woods. Now, right now, we are in mainly a coniferous forest. There are some birch species around me, but right now I found it on this patch, just this random patch on the ground. It's not on wood. I'm gonna assume that there's probably wood buried underneath here because it creates like a little bump on the soil, but I don't know, to me it doesn't seem like this would be a deciduous species. But then right beside it there is a description for another species called the red-orange Mycena, the Mycena strobilinoides, and this one makes more sense because the habitat is in conifer needles, especially pine. However, it says that the shape of the cap is conical, becoming bell-shaped. and there's not really any indication that it becomes flat or even sunken like this. It also says that the gills have scarlet edges, and that is within italics. This one doesn't seem to have scarlet edges. I'm not sure what scarlet edges would look like, but this doesn't seem to have it. So I'm guessing that that is not it. Although it also says that this species is often seen in a great quantity in late fall. At least I've narrowed it down to the genera. I would say this is Tricoloma, this is some kind of Mycena. You know what? I'm just going to take a gander and assume that it is the first kind of Mycena, the Mycena leiana. Even if it is mostly found in deciduous woods, there's some deciduous species right here. It makes more sense in terms of the shape of the mushroom, but here's a little depiction of how difficult and tricky it is to identify all these tiny little mushrooms. Another issue that I'm encountering is I have no way of verifying whether my identifications are correct or not. For some species, it's not too difficult because they're quite distinctive, but for others, there are a lot of different kinds of species of mushrooms that kind of look the same from each other, and I still don't really know how to fully understand and associate what I read in these really specific mushroom identification books and interpret that based on like the mushroom specimen I have. So at this point, I'm guessing. Really, I'm making as much of an educated guess as I can, but there's no way of me determining the accuracy of these things. So I think moving forward, I definitely need to have some kind of verification system. So that will involve trying to find someone who's a mushroom expert and is willing to verify like 100 species. Here are all the species that I've found in my first month. Not bad, but we still have a long ways to go. And with winter now at my footsteps, this challenge is about to get even harder.